My final project for the MA Textile Design is looking at indigenous materials to this area. So Norfolk Reed became quite a thing for me initially, and I made contact with Andrea Kelly of the Broads Authority, who was really helpful in this and wanted to increase the awareness of Reed and the quality of Norfolk Reed.
I took part in the Bishop's Art Prize earlier on in the year. It was something that was publicised through the university, and the theme was set by the Bishop, and this year it was darkness and light. So I decided to have a go, and I produced an abstract meditative piece designed for the place it was shown, which was the hostelry at the cathedral.
My project is a series of cards with different imagery on them, which can be used to lay out in a series on a table as you're telling a story to try and help relate that story. And it's good for children learning to tell stories and learning about narratives, and that's the basis of my project.
My project is called Parallel Point. It's a collaborative project with a London-based painter called Adam Lawrence Headley, who I got in touch with last summer, and through a email dialogue from the point of view of an artist and a curator, we basically put together quite a large body of written work. And I curated 2 exhibitions of his work in London in March under the Parallel Point title.
My project, Mirror Noise, was a 6-day installation at the Forum's Fusion digital screens with 3 separate screens. Each one was linked to a webcam, and when a viewer approached the webcam, they found themselves as part of that picture. So really, it was a kind of portraiture experiment. I was very interested to see how different groups of people, everyday people just coming and doing their shopping, popping into the gallery, would react to my piece.
Well, I guess the most obvious way that my projects engage with the public is by the outcome being 2 public exhibitions being run simultaneously in live venues in London. One was in Dalston and one was in Peckham.
For my own project, the exhibition was actually in a public gallery, so by its very nature it was open to in the public domain, and like Alex as well, I was very interested to see what people's reactions were who went into that space not necessarily knowing what they were going to get, and I found that very informative.
It is important to work with partners external to the university so that you're not blinkered. You need to be reaching out and just looking further beyond what your practice is now to what it could become.
As a part-time student, I've been in the university environment now for 2 years, and you have quite a strong community around you. It's very supportive, so you kind of need to get out there in the real world. If you're going to take your practice forward, you've got to know what's out there.
It's important to work with people external to the university because it prevents things from becoming too insular. It's easy to fall into a routine where you're always getting the same feedback from the same people every week. So to be able to get something new and different and a really objective viewpoint prevents your work from becoming too stagnant.
Most of my research was quite practical. It mainly consisted of doing a lot of research about galleries in London that would show an artist that was unknown, and like all the setbacks and the responses and non-responses, it really helped to shape the project.
The research I undertook was mainly of 2 types. One was technical research. It was a very technically enabled project, so I had to understand what was technically possible and how to do it. And the other aspects of research was really about how people might react and respond to this interactive environment, and really kind of trying to identify that space between playfulness and perhaps how people are with toys and games and gameplay, and where playfulness becomes gameplay, which was really informative.
Personal highlights have been working with lots of different materials, seeing how indigenous materials actually relate to the area that we're in, and how someone like the Broads Authority have a lot of different avenues to go down to find creative uses for those materials.
For me, one of the greatest pleasures of putting this project on was just watching people react and interact with the project in all sorts of ways, but mainly having fun. One group I can recall in particular just in absolute hysterics for several minutes, and yeah, it really kind of made it seem worthwhile.
I think the highlights for me for my project was the private view, because we could have a drink and relax after everything had been done. But I think the biggest highlight was probably receiving the review, because when you're trying to organise 2 simultaneous shows in another city and trying to juggle doing work for your MA, you're right in the thick of it and you don't really have time to reflect on what you've done. So it was really great to get the review, because it just meant that everything was worth it and people could understand what you were trying to achieve.
It was really exciting for me to be able to go down to London and to present to the board, and that whole experience I thought was just really enriching. And then in addition to that, after I had engaged the RSA that way, I started to get a couple invitations to some networking events and meet a lot of people in the industry who were doing some similar things, and so in that respect it was really very valuable.
As making films actually is only a very recent thing for me. This was the first film I put out in the public domain, and until I put it out there I didn't know what was going to happen, so it was just so brilliant to see that it worked. People liked it, they got it, and actually that I could sit and watch it myself over and over again, and it still meant so much to me, and it's still working, and that has really spurred me on in my MA work, because that showed me that I can carry on in this area. Films do work for me. I can take it further.
And of course you won.